nos estiramos un poco. Vamos con la siguiente charla. ¿Podemos ser felices no solo por momentos, pero sentir una felicidad profunda y duradera? Una felicidad que no sintamos, que se nos escapa de las manos cuando pensamos que ya la tenemos. Porque en definitiva, parte del mundo posible que queremos crear no es solo el mundo del planeta Tierra, es nuestro propio mundo, nuestra propia vida. Y todos queremos ser felices. Para este tema quiero invitar a la doctora Tara Smith, doctora en filosofía de la Universidad de Johns Hopkins, especializada en teoría moral y política y profesora de la Universidad de Texas, quien nos hablará hoy de felicidad, duradera, profunda, egoísta. Un fuerte aplauso para Tara. Thank you, Tara.
Just a minute. See what's going on. Good morning. Welcome back to those of you who were able to be here yesterday, and welcome afresh to those of you who are new to us today. I hope everyone has received a handout. I'll make a little bit of reference to that as we go. Happiness. Yesterday, I discussed what's possible when we unleash minds and markets from shackles, from somebody else's coercive restrictions. Today, I'm going to direct your attention not to human potential, but to your own. Happiness, that elusive ideal. That is how so many people think of it. But it isn't elusive. It isn't mysterious. It is possible. Better, it's not just possible. You can make your happiness probable. You can make your happiness actual. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about what happiness is and what it takes. Now, because of the time constraints, I'm really just sketching this morning. But getting even a somewhat firmer grip on what happiness really is and isn't, and attending to the core of its demands, I think goes a long way toward positioning us to better achieve our individual happiness. So, the agenda, and this is the outline basically on the handout. I'm going to talk about how happiness is deep and whole, how it is abiding, an ongoing concern and feature of a life, and why it demands selfishness. So notice something about those three. The first two address the kind of good that happiness is, a deep one, an ongoing one. The third issue, selfishness, that concerns its moral stature and the path to attaining happiness. Okay. To orient ourselves, for starters, just observe the kind of thing that happiness is. It's a condition. It's not an object. It's not a cool car, a big house, a wonderful sound system and screen system in your home, right? Happiness refers to a way of leading one's life. It's a process. Again, it's a condition that a life can have, being happy. It isn't an end state. It resides rather in the doing, in the living, in doing well, leading one's life in a constructive manner. We talk about plants, plants and trees, the basil plant, the pecan tree, whatever it might be. We talk about plants, sometimes, thriving. We talk about the new baby, the child, flourishing, meaning, essentially, that their activities are proceeding healthily. Well, for a person, an adult, to be happy means he is flourishing. And that's an active process, as it is with plants and infants and so on. Happiness, again, all I'm stressing here is happiness is a matter of doing rather than of having, of simply possessing. It's the course of achieving values, objective values. And I would ask you to look at the first passage on the handout from Ayn Rand under the section where I have passages. I'll just read the beginning of that. But she defines happiness as that state of consciousness which proceeds from the achievement of one's values. Okay. So let me get to the first feature that I'm going to speak of today, at least. Happiness is deep. as opposed to superficial, just the surface temperature of how you're doing or your mood. The word happiness often suggests passive reaction to external events around you. You know, I'm happy that my team won last night. I'm happy that my trip down to Buenos Aires was relatively smooth, right? Yeah, it's perfectly fine to use the term in those senses as we do, but the quest for happiness isn't merely for a string of pleasing events, for a random assortment of good breaks, right? Happiness is something you build by pursuing values, by achieving values across a range of areas. So let me elaborate a little bit on this. A person's happiness is rooted, and again, I'm talking about its depth here, right? Well, it's rooted in a number of things that contribute to his overall well-being, and that he is largely, at least, responsible for. How his work is going, for instance. How his relationships are going, especially the most important relationships to him. How his finances are going, his health, his mental health. Is he working on that anxiety problem that he has? Those sorts of things, right? So happiness isn't the mild pleasure of, can't read my handwriting here, of, you know, having these lucky breaks, kind of like watching skimming stones on the water. It's pleasing in a mild way. It's much deeper. A person has to coordinate the variety of values that contribute to his well-being. No single element by itself makes a person flourish. How much money you make, that's not it. That's not all it is. How nice an apartment you might have, how your marriage is going. Any of those could be really significant, but by themselves, they're not enough to make a person flourish, to make a person well and happy. Happiness isn't concerned with just one piece of how your life is going. Human life subsumes a tapestry of specific interests, and the overall condition of a life depends on the operation and interactions of all of them. Okay? Thus, happiness is deep in that it draws from many deeper roots, many contributors. Ultimately, happiness involves both important things in your life going well, how your ends are progressing, and your awareness of that. It involves both the actuality of your achieving values, and yeah, you're aware of that, you have a sense of that, and that feels good, okay? And further, I think the depth that we need to understand is that happiness ultimately comes from you, from the choices you make, from your agency, which is something we talked about a little bit in one of the panels yesterday. It comes from you being effective in pursuing objective values. So at root, a person's happiness doesn't depend on what happens, you know, all around him that's out of his control. No, it's when you are effective in going after your ends, your goals, your values. What that gives you is a distinct kind of contentment, the life satisfaction that we call happiness. Okay. Next, this is 3 on the outline. Happiness is abiding. It's a persisting quality, an ongoing feature of a person's life. Now, I don't mean that it's at an entirely constant level throughout, that there won't be ups and downs of different significance at times, right? But since happiness isn't fundamentally determined by things out of your control around you, it has a more stable, enduring character. It's not episodic, it's not transient, ephemeral. It's the character of your course. When a person is happy, you know, when we say of someone truthfully, he's happy, or when you know it yourself, that's really about how the whole is going, okay? It's the character of your course. Now, advocates of egoism, and egoism, the selfish pursuit of happiness, right? Okay. Advocates of egoism will often say, and I'm sure you've heard this, you know, it's long-term interest, not just short-term interest. And that's true. But that doesn't get at the full story here. I mean, that's certainly true and important. You need to think about your long-term well-being as well as the immediate satisfactions. But there is more to the story. Happiness results from acting in all of the ways that characteristically generate values. and satisfaction. We're after sustainable happiness, the kind of happiness and values that can sustain you. Thus, you must always look for the larger logic, not just the later, what's going to happen long term, but of whatever choices you're making, whatever decisions about what goals to pursue and how to go after them, right? You've got to look at the larger logic among your options. You've got to grapple not just with the long term versus the short, but with questions like, is this really going to be good for me? On balance, big picture, given all of the different dimensions of my well-being that really do make a difference to me. For instance, yeah, but what about my love life? What about work that I really find rewarding or challenging? Or what about, I really do love to travel, or I love this kind of very rugged physical recreation, right? I mean, if some of those or several of those are really important to you, you've got to pursue each in a way that gives you the space and the time to pursue the others as well. So this is what I mean by saying it's not just about long-term versus short-term. It's, okay, I've got a whole, again, tapestry of values here. How can I arrange them and pursue them such that they're giving me the kinds of satisfaction that overall marks my course as a flourishing one, okay? So again, this abiding character of happiness reflects the depth and the holism that we were just talking about a minute ago. Now, obviously, things out of your control can go badly. And, sometimes you can be severely affected by things you couldn't help. But again, happiness is not a measure of the moment. It's the condition of a life, of a lifetime. And I think it's helpful to think about your life as a lifetime, because I think it helps you stay cognizant of the fact that it's finite. There's a first day, your birthday, right? And there's going to be a final day. It's finite, your life, your lifetime. And that can help energize you to appreciate the importance of each piece of it, each day. So happiness comes from attending to the full dimensions of your life. All right. So how can I get happiness? Let's get selfish now. Let's get to the selfishness portion. How can I get it? How can I have happiness? This is number 4 on the outline. And I do want to say, this is an issue on which I have lectured in a few different venues and written in a few different formats. And I'm going to come at the issue a little bit differently today than I have elsewhere, but I hope those of you who are interested in the subject might look at some of the other things I've written or lectured on. There are some lectures available online that I've given for the Ayn Rand Institute. That would be really, I think, helpful complements to some of what I'm going to be stressing today, okay? For starters, this is on how can you get happiness. It takes a lot of thought. It takes serious reflection, as I hope some of what I've been talking about already makes apparent. Think for a minute about some people who you know in your circle, your personal circle, who aren't happy. And leave aside those people for whom you might think, well, there's really good reason for him or her not to be happy. He's got that, maybe it's a disability, maybe, for whatever reason, severe financial strain or really bad situation with his parents or his upbringing and so on. Leave aside those sorts of cases. Think about if there's anybody you know, it's like who are basically in pretty good circumstances, okay? You're not saying great, but, they have the capacity to be happy. But they're not. And you sometimes have that sense of a friend or a cousin or a sibling, it's like, and he never will be. Do you know any such people? I don't know, I can't really say. Do some of you have such people in your lives like, yeah, he's not happy and nothing's ever going to make him happy? I mean, I don't know a lot of these people, but you know some of these people. What's going on? What the hell is wrong with these people if it's not, okay, they had the neglectful parents or a horrible education or whatever it might be? Well, I think parts of the problem, at least sometimes, okay, and I am not a psychologist, but I think parts of the problem sometimes are they don't know what they want. Or they don't know themselves very well, very deeply or very accurately. They have some unrealistic ideas of their abilities, what they can't do, or maybe what they can do. They might have unrealistic expectations about what happiness itself is, and what it's going to give them, and what they have to bring to it to make it, okay? My point here is simply to underscore this idea that happiness requires careful thought about a number of things, including about oneself, one's abilities, one's real desires or wants, right? So generic presumptions about, oh, this will make you happy or that'll make you happy, they are not going to work. The individual has to identify what's in my interest and how best can I achieve that. Am I really going to be satisfied with this relationship with him? It gives me A, B, and C, but you know, there's this other aspect that's just important to me that I'm not getting with Marco, and I really think, you know, Alex is the man for me, or whatever it might be, okay? So thought. A lot of thought does have to go into it on an ongoing basis. A second aspect of what's necessary to be happy. You earn happiness by making good choices through your actions. You earn it from being the person you want to be, from following the guidance of rational virtues. And I've also placed on the handout a list of the 7 moral virtues that Ayn Rand identified: rationality, honesty, justice, independence, integrity, productiveness, pride. She writes at length on all of these. Others of us have elaborated still further. Living by these virtues is a discipline. It will keep you from doing whatever you feel like doing in the moment and thinking, oh, this will make me happy now, right? But there are things that you feel like doing in the moment that don't really serve your ongoing, deeper flourishing. And notice I said a minute ago, you earn your happiness through what you do, through the choices that you make. And I think it's important to appreciate that you earn it even when circumstances work against you or when things don't work out, right? Again, things out of your control can happen and can set you back in various ways. But when you do what you really rationally and by the virtues and by principles think you should do, you will feel the satisfaction from knowing that I did what I could do there. You know, I did what I could do, I did what I should have done. That will be a good feeling. But moreover, you strengthen yourself in the sense that you're strengthening the muscles of your virtues, of living by those principles, and that strengthens you for the future encounters that you might have, right? You're not going to win them all, but you're making yourself more likely to win more in the future, okay? All right. Another feature of the selfishness that's required, an extremely important feature, critical to understanding how we can be happy. Happiness is self-generated. You can't give it to another person. You can't transfer it. You can't hand it off. Even the person, perhaps the person you love most in the world and know the best, the most closely, the most intimately. You can't make another person happy. You can help in all sorts of tangible ways that can have a real, serious, palpable impact on another person, materially or spiritually. You know, if you have the capacity, the material means, the wealth, for instance, you know, there are things you could do. Pay for somebody's education, pay for the surgery or some of the medical materials they might need. You could give a kidney. You could give real understanding and listening and good counsel and so on. But at the end of the day, I can't make you happy. I can't make you feel good. I can't make you feel good about your life or in your life. I can't make what it feels like to be you agreeable. And I can't make you do good, make the good choices that will actually earn you values and the satisfaction that comes from achieving your values. Happiness is a function of how you act. It comes from within. It's the experience you have at your achieving values. And that is a unique experience, isn't it? Think for a minute about little children when they're first learning to do certain things for themselves, and they're so excited when they're first able to do it. You know, like, oh, I tied my own shoes today, you know, or I put my own jacket on and zipped the zipper, you know, or now let's make them an urban kid. Oh, I took the subway today on my own for the first time. And, you know, you're a little older, let's hope, by the time you do that. But it's like, ooh, yeah, I'm feeling pretty good, big deal. That's a great feeling. And it's a great kind of feeling we can still have when we're 25, 45, whatever it might be. Okay. again, this is an aspect of something I referred to earlier. Incidental good fortune is welcome. My mother sends me care packages sometimes out of the blue. You know, not for my birthday, not for Christmas, not for a special occasion, but it's really nice when you get those little surprises and her nice, good Italian baking and stuff. I mean, it's wonderful. But that's not the stuff that happiness is made of. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm happy, I'm delighted, I give her a call, you know, and all that. But that's not, you know, good luck or good fortune or pleasing surprises, that's not the core of flourishing, okay? Happiness ultimately is, again, self-generated, internal. It's personal, it's private, inescapably. It's that last thought to the pillow, first light of day, interior condition. It's an internal experience you can't really share in the end. No one else can touch it. But there's an important payoff to this point, an important implication for morality and for selfishness. If happiness must be self-generated, if it can't be gifted or bestowed on someone else, then there's no point in working to make other people happy. It's a waste. It's a dead end. The only way for individuals to be happy is to go after their own happiness. Happiness is a do-it-yourself operation. It's an inside job, you might say. If a person is going to be happy, he needs to be selfish. Now, I hasten to add, he needs to be rationally selfish. He needs to abide by the virtues, the principles that Rand identified. It doesn't mean doing whatever you want just because you want to. It means pursuing what you want thoughtfully, like an adult, okay? Thinking about what is really going to be good for you, big picture, full gamut of values, thinking about that larger logic again. Okay, I have a few things I want to say to wrap all this up, and then we should have some time for questions. I could easily imagine people objecting, perhaps some of you thinking this in the audience, or perhaps others who would invade our conference, you know, why happiness as a topic for us all to be considering today? I mean, look, the objection might run, don't we have bigger problems on our hands? It's very nice for you Americans to come, you know, they fly in some Americans and they lecture us about, oh, go after your happiness and all. That's very nice. There are problems in the world. I mean, we're just getting over COVID and dealing with all of that. There are climate issues. There's war in the bloody Ukraine, right? I mean, close to home, we have this inflation that's, my God, you can't keep up with. I mean, we have problems. How self-indulgent to be thinking about happiness, right? Isn't that a nice, cozy topic for the privileged? All this navel-gazing and self-indulgence. Why examine happiness? Because you only live once. This is it. This is not a dress rehearsal. My life doesn't start later, well, when I'm 25, or when I move out of the house, you know, or when I end that relationship or get that degree, or when I retire, or, oh, this is it. We're on the clock now. And if you want your life, your lifetime to be happy, then you need to think seriously about what it demands and go out and get it. Happiness isn't an elusive phenomenon, a pipe dream ever beyond one's grasp. It is possible. It's real. Some people are happy. But it's not easy at the same time. It's not simple. It's not simply an attitude adjustment. You know, once in a while there's a book on those self-help shelves in the bookstores. Oh, choose to be happy. It's not that easy, okay? You have to think about your purpose, your goals. You have to then make realistic plans for attaining them. That will make your life sustainable and worth sustaining. It requires self-honesty. Think again of those loser friends, you know, who will never be happy. It requires self-honesty about what you want really and what you're equipped to do and what you can do to make yourself better equipped to get the things that you want. It takes certain traits. It takes ambition. It takes resilience. It takes the virtues, practicing honesty and justice and integrity and so on. And the one thing that I especially want to emphasize this morning is it takes commitment. It takes unequivocal, unconflicted commitment to your happiness as your highest purpose. You've got to go all in. For me, it's funny, and again, I've lectured on happiness a lot of times, a lot of different places, in a lot of different ways. And I thought after sort of this question arose to me, yeah, couldn't this seem pretty self-indulgent in the world these days? I thought, Tara, why are you interested in this topic again? When Maria and I were chatting a little bit originally about what I might talk about, why did I go for happiness? I mean, I had some obvious reasons. I was like, yeah, why did I go for happiness? Why am I so interested in this issue that I've given it so much attention over many years now? Because I love my life. And I want to understand how to milk the most of it. And that has just been something I've been interested in for a long, long time. I find, I hope you don't mind my getting personal with people I don't know too much, I just find living the most bloody fun you can have. I mean, I am very excited to wake up in the morning. This is a fun time. This is great. I don't owe it to anybody else to care more about anything else. I wasn't born with that idea in my head. I was raised a good Catholic girl. But I've been gradually, like over the decades, coming to terms and coming to be at peace with this. Yeah, I don't owe my life to anybody else. Right? As Artie Duncanson was talking about, no. And the first step, I think, toward being happy really is confronting that question of, what do I want, and do I want to be happy? Confront that question honestly. Do you want it? Not with the answer known in advance. Oh, I know the right answer here. You know, I'm supposed to say, yes, I want my happiness. No. Realize what it means, what it's going to entail, what it's going to demand. Do I want that? If it doesn't matter to you all that much, or if you're kind of ambivalent, maybe from guilt that you really should be serving something better than yourself, or placing your family, for instance, before yourself. Or maybe it's not from guilt so much as from fear. Well, what if I fail, if I go after these things, if I acknowledge that I really want this or that, but I might not be able to get it, right? Or maybe it's not just that I'm afraid of failure or fear of that, but maybe it's just sort of indifference, yeah, a certain detachment. Yeah, that's one way to live, going all in for values. But, you know, there are other ways. That seems to suit some people. Well, then with that kind of ambivalence, then you're not going to do what it takes, and you certainly won't achieve values and the correlative satisfactions. You'll be like one of the loser cousins or friends who's always whining, always pining, never satisfied. But look, there's no duty to pursue happiness. It's up to you. If you don't want it, hey, you can coast. You'll live a while, right? Eventually you'll die like the rest of us who do value our lives. You just won't have valued yours very much. And you won't have made very much of it. So again, there's no duty to be happy, but it's a value that you can choose. And the starting point on the road to happiness really is, I think, confronting really seriously from all perspectives, do I want it? And then what form will it take? What specifically do I want to make my life the best I can do? The best I can make it. If you do want your life, get serious about it. Get selfish about it. And read, I think, the really valuable, invaluable guidance that Ayn Rand has given us on how to achieve happiness. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Tara. Ok, tenemos 15 minutos para preguntas. Después vamos a hacer un break de 15-20 minutos, así que, por favor, si quieren hacer una pregunta a Tara, adelante. Pregunta.
Hola, Tara, buen día. Yo quiero hacer una pregunta.
Give me 1 second,
Yes.
okay? Sorry. And let's see. Wait, is there a thing that I turn to get it to?
Oh,
the
no.
right language?
We need...
That's the wrong- Sorry. Might be oh, okay, good.
very comfortable.
I think so.
Buen día, Tara. Yo quiero saber cómo se puede ayudar, ya que la felicidad nuestra...
No, un segundo.
Now I can. Yes. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Ahora sí.
Ya que la felicidad no es transferible, ¿cómo puedo hacer para ayudar a otra gente a buscar ese camino de felicidad? Ya que hay mucha gente en Argentina que tiene que trabajar muchísimas horas por un salario mínimo para cubrir lo básico para sus hijos y no le queda tiempo para hacer cosas que le den placer, que le den felicidad. ¿Cómo podemos hacer para ayudarlos a buscarla?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, thank you for a good and very realistic question, right? The difficulty, now I can hear myself, which is distracting. The difficulty that people have when circumstances are really straining. Or, I mean, we are at some stages in our lives and in some places around the world in more conducive conditions to being happy. And that's undeniable. But I think one really important aspect of what you can do to try to help people be happy or help yourself be happy is recognize what is in my control. It might be relatively little or, for a certain period, but again, we've spoken of agency a little bit off and on this weekend. Face the things you can make better, even if it's marginally better, but what would make what would make this situation, if it's a really bad situation, more tolerable? But really think seriously about that and think ambitiously within the confines of your genuinely unchangeable circumstances. Be willing to consider what is unchangeable. What have I taken for granted in the past that maybe those boundaries aren't as strict or hard and fast as I had thought they were. So part of it is, again, just really thinking, imagining, do I have to do this? Do I have to live here? Do I have to stay in this city with this family or in this country? Now, some of these are big radical things. And again, people's circumstances vary. Some people have taken on some obligations that they are obligated to fulfill. But within most confines, there's room in which you can build a better life. And I don't mean necessarily dramatically better, but you can make your day a happier place to be by even small steps. And I think whatever the circumstances one is in, you want to be looking to do that. So, okay, what really is unchangeable? And we want to be realistic about that because I think more is changeable, more is possible. That's the theme of this weekend, right? Then we often kind of fall into supposing. And what can I do, just in effect, close to home, near term, not term so much, but just near, how can I make my life the best I can make it today? In the small ways, in the larger ways. And that adds up to building the muscles of greater independence, of greater ambition, and that sort of thing, as well as makes you feel good from doing what you're doing now. Okay. Yes. And give me a hint. Is this going to be in Spanish? No. Okay.
Mike, el mic ese. A ver.
No?
A ver, estoy probando, si no. Ahí va. Ahora sí.
Okay. Good morning, Tara. I wanted to ask you, you emphasized a lot in how important it is to know ourselves in order to achieve happiness. But even though I 100% agree with that, it's something that is easier said than done. So how can we know ourselves and how can we help others to know themselves in order so not only we can achieve happiness, but others also?
No, I think that is a good question because I do think it's hard to know oneself. It doesn't come easily. Now, it comes more easily to some people than others, but we're not trained to do a lot of self-examination. Our cultures are so oriented towards serving others and altruism in all its permutations that Think of children. It's not, what do you really enjoy doing? It's, are you being a good team player? Are you part of the campaign to give back to the community this, on this weekend? Or are you part of the campaign to clean up the parks for the sake of the environment? It's for the sake of others, for the sake of something else other than you. So really paying attention to, what do I like? What excites me? What am I good at? Like gradually a person should be getting a sense of those things, but our attention is so directed away from it that then it can seem, again, like what's, derogatorily called navel gazing if you actually think, I've got some problems here, or I want to really work on what I want in life. But I think, so here's a very simple thing that a lot of people do. Just write in your journal. You don't need to have a therapist necessarily. I mean, sometimes having a therapist can be really useful and so on, right? But be willing, so introspect, whether in writing, I find that very useful often, but just keep in touch with yourself. Get in the habit, I think this can be really valuable for people, of just thinking about, why did I have such a strong reaction yesterday at that meeting at the department or that meeting at the office, right? I mean, we all have emotions. I mean, we're all going a mile a minute. I'm trying to answer the question even in a mile a minute now. We're all fast. We're all, overcommitted, feel like we have less time than ever and so on, right? Take a little time to reflect on what's been going on, whether it be the previous day or, my gosh, what was this week like for me beyond the day-to-day and just the shuttling around of the children or whatever it might be with my partner, right? You've got to make some time to step back and reflect on what's going well, what's not going well, why did I feel that way? Be willing to answer those questions in ways that aren't always going to be fun or flattering. Like, it's going to be sometimes, you don't always like what you find when you introspect. You find, gee, that was kind of cowardly of you, Tara. Or, oh, you see, you still carry around this insecurity. You would think by the time you're in your goddamn 60s, you would get over that. So it's not like, oh, it's just going to be a walk in the park when you introspect and then you know what to go for in life. But I guess part of what I want to convey is you don't need a professional, And I think good friends can be good friends to one another in the sense that you ask the probing question, not necessarily that you demand an answer right now, but you have those kinds of conversations where, for instance, if you notice a friend doesn't seem as maybe content in a relationship as they had been earlier on or whatever, you try to nudge them in the direction of being more thoughtful about it, not giving them the answers and so on. So I do think there are things we can do to help others as well as ourselves. I'm not going to come in and give you love life advice. I don't know the guy from a hole in it, right? He's a nice musician, he's cute. Anyway.
Thank you.
I would love some, though.
We'll compare notes.
Hello, Tara. Thank
Hi.
you very much for a great talk. We know in some way that happiness is related to self-esteem. I can imagine a person who doesn't love himself or herself being happy. So at the same time, we know that we can provide happiness to someone, and you cannot provide self-esteem to someone. So for parents who are trying to make their kids happy, what advice would you give them to not give them self-esteem, but to create the context where they can raise their self-esteem?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I have to begin by saying I'm not a parent, and I never have been. So I don't have personal experience with this has worked or not. Though I'm very interested in self-esteem. I think that's a really important value. Rand emphasizes it as one of the central values, but just in the last few years, I've long known that she considers it that. In the last few years, I've come to see more than ever, I think, how integral it is to the ability to be happy, as you're bringing out that really important connection. So I've talked to parents, among others, in part when I was really thinking and writing about self-esteem, about their experience with raising others to grow into self-esteem. And I think one interesting thing that a number of them said, and these were not all objectivists. A few of them were objectivist parents, people who basically agreed with the philosophy of Ayn Rand, but several of them weren't. But they spoke of putting a child in conditions in which he or she can take some chances, like modest, safe, not like wild chances. You throw the smallest child on the wildest ride at Disneyland or something, but, give them opportunities where they can push themselves a little bit more and see their own efficacy. Because I think largely what self-esteem comes from is something like that little girl I raised who's first tying the shoes for herself or whatever, right? It's like, oh, that little efficacy. I was able to do this thing I wanted to do. Simple, right? So give them opportunities to grow their muscles and their ability and to see. And it's not so much, unfortunately, I mean, self-esteem is a wonderful thing. And it's gotten a lot of attention in the last 20 or 30 years from psychologists, from educators and all. Unfortunately, I say unfortunately, it's been very distorted in people's understandings of it. And I think Yaron might have mentioned this yesterday. I mean, in the US, we give trophies for, showing up, for doing nothing, right? And my telling a child or anybody else, you should feel good about yourself, doesn't make them feel good about themselves. It's self-esteem. It's not the esteem of mommy or daddy or the teacher in second grade, right? It's self-esteem. Well, that comes from within. So it's not so much that you want to praise the kid. Hey, you did a good job tying your shoes. Like, how did that make you feel? How did that, that kind of thing. But I bet there are a lot of people here who have experience with parenting who could add a lot more to this conversation. So something to talk about over lunch, guys. Anyway, thanks.
¿No más preguntas? Sí, ¿no más? Sí, tenemos tiempo para una.
Okay, sorry, thank you. Give me a sec to turn the thing up.
Hola Tara, muchas gracias por tu disertación, un placer escucharte. Mi pregunta viene dada, son dos en realidad. Una es, ¿qué es el florecimiento dentro de la visión objetivista? ¿Y cuál es el rol que tiene el florecimiento en la búsqueda de la felicidad? Gracias, Tara.
Okay, so the role, what do I mean by flourishing and its role in achieving happiness? One way to put it, this is somewhat philosophical and abstract, is flourishing is the condition, the process of a living organism functioning in the ways that it needs to function in order to live. I mean, any living organism, and I brought up plants, I didn't bring up animals, I think I brought up maybe infants, right? But things have to be, a plant has to be digesting the water or absorbing the sunlight or whatever that particular plant needs. It needs to be doing those things in a certain way in order to keep on living, such that when I go home, the pecan tree is still there, or think of the basil plant in the middle of the summer or something like that. It's probably much more vivid with an animal. You take your pets to the vet because he's been lethargic of late, or what, I don't have pets either, so I really need a lot more life experience, don't I? It's enough just managing me and introspecting about my problems, let alone having these other things to take care of. But anyway, so what was I saying? I mean, it's clear that something can, so an animal, a pet, or just other animals, not necessarily pets, right, can be alive, but not doing well. I mean, also, there are people in the hospital. There are people who are sick. They're alive, but they're not doing well. They're not functioning physically, even, in a way that's conducive to their longevity, to their continued having the life of a human being, of a duck, right? Think about a lame duck. But a literal lame duck, right? Well, it's a duck, but it's lame. It's going to have a harder time doing what ducks need to do to keep going. So flourishing is the condition, well, also when all systems are go, basically, right? Doesn't mean absolutely everything is humming along perfectly, but the person is functioning in a way conducive to its continued living and thriving. And for human beings, the psychological is as important as the physical, right? I mean, when I give some of these simple plant and animal examples, it's like, well, as long as it's getting fed and it's finding food and it's fast enough, Well, with human beings, we need to take care of our psyches as well, our emotional or mental lives, because we are volitional, because we choose our actions and we choose the kinds of things that we do, the diets that we keep, the exercise that we keep, the mix of satisfying work, satisfying relationships, and so on. So flourishing, again, speaks to a way of functioning that is conducive to that kind of being, in this case a human being, being able to continue. For what it's worth, there is a chapter in one of my books. The book is called Viable Values, and there's a chapter that goes into what Rand and objectivism means by flourishing as distinguished, I'll put that in quotes, from living. Okay, so there's more to be found on that. Was that both questions? Okay, thank you.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias a Tara.
Okay, good, thank you.
Ahora sí, tenemos hasta las 11:20, así que tienen un break ahora y nos vemos en 20 minutos, un poquito menos, con la siguiente charla. Nada más. Sí, lo vamos a tener a Aaron Smith, fellow del Ayn Rand Institute e instructor del Ayn Rand University, que va a hablar ahora 11:20, así que nos vemos en 20 minutos. Yeah.